getting ready for Halloween, and I'm showing you how to make this fabulous monster arch for Halloween. I've bought this arch kit. The kit comes with a 10-foot pole which packs down really neatly, and it's connected together with this elasticated bungee cord. Okay, so you can pack that away. That is not going to take up much room. You get 2 clamps with this system, and you get these connectors. And I know already I'm not going to use these connectors for this particular design because I want the design to be packed really tightly, and these connectors have a tendency to allow the balloons to spin round, so you don't get a particularly tightly packed arch. Okay, you need to unwind your clamp so that the space here is enough to go over your table. And there's something very specific I want to show you about this table, because my table, it has a cutout here. So I'm going to struggle to put the clamp there. It also is quite narrow here. So there is a recess under here where I can get my hand. And so I've only got about 1/2 inch or so here that I can secure the clamp to, which isn't going to be very secure for my table arch, but I've got a fix for you. So what I do, I use these 6-inch cake boards, and what I do, I simply put the cake board underneath there, and then I get my clamp and put the clamp over both the table and the cake board. Make sure the cake board is pressed against the side of the clamp here, and then just clamp everything together. Okay. That's going to secure everything really well. And what the cake board is doing, it's just extending the area underneath the table that you can clamp to. And it also means that, you're not going to damage the table underneath. So you need to do that on both sides of the table. Your 10-foot pole is ideal for a table that is 6 feet wide. My table is 4 feet in this studio. I just find a 6-foot table in this studio too unwieldy. I find it too difficult to maneuver. So I have a 4-foot table, and I have my other small table, and I have spaced them 6 feet apart. So the distance from this clamp to this clamp is 6 feet. So just imagine this is one table. Okay, a lot of the tables that you have at venues are going to be 6 feet. If you do want to make a smaller arch because your table is smaller, you can do that. But what you would end up with, if it is substantially smaller, for example, on a 4-foot table using a 10-foot pole, you will end up with a very, very tall arch rather than one that has more of a gentle curve. But what you can do with these poles is you can actually take out some of the sections. So if you wanted to remove some of the sections, you would have to cut the elasticated cable and tie a knot in it and secure it securely to remove some of these sections. I don't want to do that because I do use the 10-foot pole rather a lot, so I don't want to spoil a perfectly good pole by doing that. But that's an option to you if you want to do an arch that is for a much smaller table. So we're working on the basis of a 6-foot table, 5.5 foot, even 5 foot isn't too bad, but 4 foot is getting very tall, and it makes it hard to pack because when the arch is really high up here, then you need some steps to get up there to be able to pack the arch. Okay, so what we'll do is we'll start to connect this. Now, this pole will go together very quickly. Once you start to straighten it out, the tension means that the pole will automatically start to pull together. And a 10-foot pole is really far too difficult to work with. It's far too unwieldy. So here's what I do. I connect 2 sections of the pole together like this, okay? And then I take a little piece of 160 or 260 or a rubber band. So I've tied the 260 or 160 together, and I just secure that over the top. That's going to prevent the pole automatically connecting together. And then I secure this end in the clamp here, okay? And then I take some tape, some Gorilla Tape. So I find this Gorilla Tape is by far the strongest, and it's what I like to use if I'm using a black pole, as I am doing today. You can get other colours in some other brands, but this is the best. And then I secure the pole into this clamp here just by wrapping some tape around the clamp and around the pole itself. Okay, so just remove the 160 or 260 that you put around the pole, and you can start to allow the pole to connect together. But at this point, when I've got 1, 2, 3 sections together, it's starting to get a little bit tall for me. I'm going to allow one more section to connect. So I'm holding on to these sections here. And then now I'm going to force the arch over. Find my next section. Where is that? Pull the arch over, allow that to connect. And I'm controlling the arch with this hand. You don't need to grip it tightly, but I'm controlling it. So I just need to hold on to both sections here while I find the next piece, connect that one, move over, find the next section, because things do get twisted around. The next one, let it go up a little bit now. Okay, let it go up and over, and we can connect the last 2 pieces. Okay, and then I can put this into the clamp here, and now I can tape this side of the clamp. So let's get that secure with some tape. Again, angling it, the tape, just to secure the end in the clamp. Okay, and what I'm also going to do is tape each connection. So just make sure that they don't come undone. Okay. So I'm just taping each end of the silver connectors, because those are the weak points. So if this thing is going to spring apart, that's where it's going to happen. If the thread inside, the elasticated thread inside breaks, then these will spring apart. So we don't need, that's probably too much tape actually. We don't need a huge amount of tape to connect these together. So just work around the whole arch and tape each connection. If I were making this arch outdoors, I would use a different style of table clamp. I wouldn't use these plastic ones. Okay, so that's everything taped up nicely. Doesn't take long, just a few minutes work, and it's well worth doing. For our Halloween monster, I'm using 5-inch rounds in red, which I'm inflating to 4.5 inches or 4 strokes of the Qualitex hand pump. Okay, 4 full strokes, just round them off, put a twist in the neck, hold on to that uninflated, hold on to the untied balloon and inflate the next one. Same size, round off and tie. Okay. And you're going to need a lot of these. I'm using an 11-inch round in lime green, and I'm using a 6-inch black heart. I have already programmed my digital inflator. I'm going to inflate this to 9 inches. So I programmed my inflator on one side only to 1.1, and I fine-tuned to setting 10. Alternatively, you can inflate with a hand pump or an electric pump to 9 inches and use the sizing box. If you're using the Qualitex hand pump, I reckon it's 31 strokes of the hand pump, full strokes, 1, 2, 3, 4, so 31 strokes to get you to 9 inches, okay? What I'm going to do, I'm first going to inflate the black heart with the hand pump. I just have this thing about inflating hearts. I really like to do them with the hand pump. I feel I get a better shape, okay? That said, because we're creating a monster, if your black hearts inflate a little bit off, it doesn't matter for this design. Sometimes you get the lobes and one lobe will come out slightly bigger than the other. If that happens, it doesn't matter for this design, because this monster, the black hearts don't need to be absolutely perfect. So I'm going to inflate with 5 strokes of the hand pump. Okay, and you can see with mine here, has just gone slightly wonky. If you wanted to, you could just sort of flatten that a little bit to get a better shape, but you don't need to for this design. I've put a twist in here. I'm just so used to holding that against the hand pump, I do it automatically. And now I'm going to inflate the lime green. So I'm putting it on my pump. I'm putting the nozzle of the balloon right down to the lip of this pink pump. That's really important to get the right size, and then press the button. And then you can tie those two together. Okay? Okay, so I've inflated everything and the quantities of everything you need are going to be on screen now. Okay, so take 2 sets of red duplicates, just bring them together, wrap them around a couple of times to form a cluster of 4. And then take a duplicate of red and one of your black hearts and 11-inch lime greens, bring those together and just wrap them together to form another cluster of 4. I'm starting off with the cluster of red, and I'm just going to wrap that around the base of this pole. Remember that the base here, it is a little bit thicker because we've wrapped quite a lot of tape around here to secure the pole to the table. Start with one of the small red clusters and just carefully wrap that around the pole. This early part of the pole is thicker because we've taped it to secure it to the table. And once you get onto the untaped sections of pole, you'll be able to add the clusters much more easily. So we're just alternating a cluster of red and then one of the larger clusters, mixed clusters of red, green and the black hearts. As you add the clusters, just push them down slightly just to ensure that they are packed consistently. So you're just adding the clusters, parting 2 balloons and wrapping them round one another. So you don't need to wrap around multiple times, just wrap around once, and that will trap the arch pole in between the balloons. So just wrap around once, that traps the pole, and then just push the cluster of 4 down into position, and then just continue to build up the arch pattern. I've now started to add an occasional 6-inch heart in white instead of the black. This is to give the impression of our monster having a few teeth here and there. So the positioning of those white hearts is pretty much random, just wherever you think you want your monster's teeth to be. The black hearts represent the gaps in the teeth. So our monster hasn't had particularly good dental hygiene and he's only got a few teeth left. So continue to build up the pattern. We're coming to the top of the arch in a taped section here. So again, just a little bit tricky. You may need to just adjust as you're putting the clusters on, as you navigate those taped sections, continuing to alternate with the clusters of red and the larger clusters. And just building up the pattern. And as we come down this final section, you'll notice in a few moments that as I get towards the table on this side, I put in a cluster of 4 reds at the bottom before I add the final cluster. I just missed the next one. I've added a cluster of red, and now I add the larger cluster, and that's just because it just makes it that little bit easier. Next, I'm going to show you how to make the very scary eyeball. So I hope you're ready for a workout. So take a 5-inch round black. That's inflated to an interesting shape. I want to round that off, and I would say that is perhaps about 4.5 inches or so. I don't worry too much about the size, and I definitely don't worry about getting the eyeballs the same size. In fact, if the eyeballs are different sizes, it adds to the character. So, this is a monster. We're not looking for perfect symmetry, okay? I've got about half a 260 here with the nozzle end, and I'm just going to tie that in there, just directly to the knot, okay? What I'm going to do on the cut end here is I'm going to tie a couple of knots because I've tied a couple of knots because I want to pull this 260 through the knot, and I don't want the end to come through. So I want quite a bit of stretch here at the nozzle end, but as I pull it through the knot that I tied in the balloon, I don't want this end coming loose, if that makes sense. For the next part, you're also going to need a 260 or a 160. I happen to prefer 160s, but if you prefer 260s, then use a 260. And I'm using a 16-inch round balloon. So if you've got 18-inch balloons or if you've got 24-inch balloons in white, they work perfectly well as well. I just happen to have 16 in stock, so that's what I'm using. And inflate fully. Okay, next, let a lot of the air out. So we're probably downsizing to around about 11 inches or so. Take that 260 on your 5-inch round and tie that directly into the knot that you tie in the 16-inch. This neck does not want to pull through. Okay, got you. Okay, so I've trapped that 260 directly into that knot on the 16-inch, okay? And what you also want to do is roll that knot in the 16-inch along the neck, as far along the neck as you can, towards the nozzle of the 16-inch, or whatever size you've used, okay? Because I want to be able to press on the balloon like this, okay? So I'm pressing on the balloon, I'm taking my middle finger and I'm pushing the nozzle here. So I'm putting my finger here and I'm pushing it into the balloon. Okay, so push down and at the same time push through on this side. And at this point it helps me if I now rest on the table because I want to push all the way through the middle of the balloon right to the bottom until I can grasp hold of the nozzle and those knots. I put a twist here. That just helps trap everything. Get hold of that 160, wrap it around that cluster of knots one way, then take the other tail that you've been holding on to and wrap that in the opposite direction. Okay, so it's like tying off a bubble, a deco bubble. It's the same sort of technique. And then tie those ends into a knot. Okay, and once you've tied one knot, tie a second knot. Okay, so there you've got your eyeball. Okay, you can position this up here. But there's something else we need to do with the eyeball first. I'm using a 160 spring green and I inflate my 160s with the hand pump. I rarely use the pocket pump. It's quicker to inflate and I find you don't get the ridges. So if you're inflating with the pocket pump, I tend to find you get little ridges along as you inflate. I'm going to need my scissors. So wrap this around the eyeball and then put a twist where it meets, where the nozzle meets the rest of the 160. Put a twist into the 160 and then wrap that nozzle round a couple of times. You can snip off the end and then tie a knot. And with these 160s, I like to tie twice. Okay, and then we can trim off all the messy bits here, trim off the tails that we don't need. Okay, and then I'm going to use a black Sharpie and a red Sharpie to add the veins to the eyeball. So I just do random squiggles, some short, some long, some broken up. And then I want the eye to look bloodshot, so I add some red squiggles. It's up to you where you position your eyeballs. I'm probably going to go for closer together, and I'm just using the tails here, and I'm just going to pull them through the balloons and just tie it over the frame. So I'm feeling for the frame. I've got my hand over the top of the frame and I've pulled one tail through and I've got the other tail here and I'm just going to pull that underneath and tie a couple of times to secure that. Okay, And then we just need to position the eyeball. I quite like the fact that they're a bit loose and they wobble as people walk past. I think that adds character. I really think balloon table arches are a missed opportunity in the market at the moment, because you can do so much with them and they really are a mini version of a full-size arch. And the other thing to bear in mind is anything you do as a table arch, you can do as a full-sized arch. So we're demonstrating a table arch today, but you can very easily convert this to a full-size arch just by adding more balloons.